Okay, video on the mechanics and the chassis for the Hilux. So it runs and drives fine, or it was running and driving fine. Currently the steering gearbox is out, it was leaking, and I did rebuild it and it's still leaking, so currently that needs to go back in. Currently leaking, can go back in how it is just to move it, but will need to be rebuilt again. I did take the radiator out and repaint it. There was a bit of surface rust on it, and this front panel had small bits of rust just coming through, so that's got sandblasted back and 2 coats of POR 15 on it. The chassis front rails I've taken back to the metal. There was not that much rust on them after you cleaned them up. Still very solid. 2 coats of POR on them, and I did the inner part of the inner wings as well at the same time. Just there was little bits of rust, but the outer part of the wings, the inner wings, needs to be done. The actual wings themselves still look okay, but this kind of like inner part needs cleaned up, and the very front of the sill on both sides has a hole that needs to be patched, but majority of the sill is actually okay, so definitely would not say it needs replacement sills, just a patch on that front section. The steering knuckle had a leak at the back, so I've rebuilt the full knuckle, top and bottom bearings, cleaned the joint and new grease and everything in it, and new wheel bearings, new discs, new caliper, new pad, new disc calipers, pads on both sides, new wheel bearings on both sides. The knuckle on the other side wasn't leaking, so I just cleaned out the old grease and put new grease in, and there's a new steering arm damper there, and a new track rod end here, and the new shocks on both sides, and new brake cables on both sides of the front. Front brakes need to be bled, they're not bled at the moment, so the pedal won't be working. Also new freewheeling hubs on both sides, but I've got a matching one like this for the other side so that they both match. That's everything I really had time to do so far. The actual front axle hasn't been sanded back fully and repainted, so the diff and axle needs to be done, but I did paint the knuckles and clean them up properly when I was doing it. So that's where most of the work that I got had time to do is done. What's to be done still with the truck is probably to take the tub off and do the back, and potentially take the cab off. So underneath the cab, apart from this little bits of rust on the sill, the chassis still looks quite good. This is pretty much how the front rails looked like, and then when I grind and sandblast them back, you just had little bits of rust like around there, or these brackets. So I think this would be still quite good condition, and the floor looks still okay under the cab. Where the mounts are is, there's a bit of rust in there. It's quite hard to get into, unfortunately, so I'd be tempted to take the cab off because it's the only way you can really get in above there, but I wouldn't say it's urgent to do this part. But then where it's probably, the fuel tank protector I think needs to be replaced, so I would take it off and either make one or adjust one from a newer Hilux. I think probably quite hard to find that for a Mark III. So you have a look. Exhaust is quite new. The manifold doesn't look that new, but most of the exhaust looks quite new. Then obviously the worst part of the chassis is going to be below the tub, so it's definitely a matter of taking the tub off, I think. It seems to be, when I bought the truck, my guesswork was it's not too bad. Obviously until you grind this back, couldn't guarantee that there doesn't need to be any patches welded, but personally I couldn't find anything, you know, obviously rotted through. These bump stops have rotted completely, need to come off. But yeah, I'll just angle the phone up here. The tub, even though it looks quite bad around arches, doesn't actually look that bad. The whole tub definitely still a pretty good tub for a Mark III. The springs all round, I mean, it was driving fine. Probably my plan would have been to put new springs on the front, new springs and shocks on the back. And I probably imagine those rear brakes need to be rebuilt, cleaned up. When I took apart the front ones, they were completely seized. That's about everything I know about it. So obviously I made some progress on the very front, and then, you know, just my next plan was to take the tub off and do the back, but I ran out of time with it. Any questions? Let me know. Thanks.